I'm going to start with sort of like the end result of a timeline, just to give you a sense of like what the navigation is in the workspace of Adobe Premiere. So in the lower left area, this is the view of the media that you've imported into your project. And you can view it as line items here, where I can see that there's a folder here for footage, has all of my footage inside of it. This item right here is the actual timeline that I've created, and this is the icon for like what a timeline element looks like when it's in the the project area of your lower left panel here. And then I have a couple of other things that I've added in addition to a music track, a music file that I've imported into my project here. So yeah, that can be viewed as a list here, or as an icon view, or freeform, which I don't really use too much myself. I usually will use the icon view myself. Now, if you have a bin right here, if I double click on it, it opens it and brings me inside to see the contents of it. I can shrink down the items inside of the bin. Let me go to the icon view here. And if I want to backstep to like the main root folder, I can just click on this arrow to backstep to where I have all of the main elements here. Now, if I double click on like say like this folder that has all of my footage, if I were to just scrub through the thumbnail here, you can just hover over and click and drag on this playhead to be able to just preview really quickly what the contents are inside of that clip or inside of that shot. Or you can double click, and if you double click on it, say I'll just go down to this one and double click on it, it loads it into your source monitor. It's called the source monitor, and this is basically a way for you to be able to just sort of scrub through or scan through the shot really quickly to see what's there. You could push the play button and just actually just play it back, or just clicking and dragging on the playhead. This is called a playhead. This is also a playhead. And then you can click and drag the whole clip from your source monitor into your timeline, or you can create a selection, just like a segment of it, going from here to here. So there's a kind of a flow where you sort of like start in the lower left corner, then you look upwards to the preview or the source monitor, then diagonally down to the timeline, and then up here, this is what is playing from the timeline. So the content that you have in your timeline is in the program monitor, or really this is what I call the output monitor. Or you can call it like the timeline monitor. So what's in your timeline in terms of your edited clips will be playing here in the upper right corner. Now, if I were to zoom in on my timeline, if I click on this scroll bar at the bottom, this is a way for me to zoom in on the contents of my timeline so we can actually see a zoomed in view, a magnified view of the timeline itself. And here I can see that there's a transition that I put in here to sort of hide the cut between these two sky, like one shot ends in the sky, the other shot begins with the sky. Here's a little cross dissolve that I put in there to hide that. And then here's, my audio track. Here's a thing that I'll talk about later in the tutorial, perhaps if we get there. Now, some cuts actually, they actually don't have a transition. It's just sort of like a straight hard cut, or just like a regular cut between this clip and that clip. Okay, so I'll put the push the backslash key to snap to this view where I can see everything that's in my timeline all at one go here. Notice that we have various video tracks, V1, 2, 3, etc. for the video, the various elements of video tracks you can be putting in your timeline. And if you have multiple audio tracks, there are multiple available here for A1, A2, A3, etc. So let me just close this. I'm going to just save this. I'm going to start from scratch. Yeah, I'll just quit Premiere Pro, start from the beginning. Click on Premiere Pro here, open it up. And what you should do footage before you do anything with Premiere Pro. So what I've done just for my demo here, let's say I have like semester 2. Let's just imagine that this is your class folder on your desktop. And then you should have a subfolder, Project 3, in this case, Project 3 revealing shots. Call it what you like. It's your organization, but there should be some kind of Project 3 subfolder on your computer. And then you have gathered all of the video clips into that subfolder. And so here's all the stuff that I shot as I was, prepping for this project for all of you guys in class here. So it's already there. And then once you have it pre-organized, then you can open up Premiere Pro. And that's very important. Okay, so I'm going to click on New Project. And I can just go to the title and I can call it, Project 3A, Revealing Shots. And then this is important here just to know where it's saving it. You don't have to change this, but just note that under the users and under like the name for you or me in this case, and then under the movies subfolder of MQuinn, under a subfolder there called Premiere Project Files, that's where the Premiere Project file is going to be saved. And that's just useful to know because you might want to open up a project file directly by going to the subfolder that it's in. And this is the default for where it saves project files. Your username, movie subfolder, and then Premiere Project Files. And then the file itself is going to have the name that you give it right here. Now, if you have a GPU accelerator, probably you don't, but I do. So whatever the default is here is fine, under how it's going to be rendering. And then the defaults here are fine. If it doesn't save timecode, I would click timecode here. And then, audio samples and then HDV are fine here. Probably these are the defaults, and so probably you don't need to change that. Okay, so then let's click on OK. And then it does some thinking, processing and setting up and initializing some things. So this is all empty right here. The first thing I'm going to do is click on Window and Workspaces. And there are two different workspaces that you might check out in terms of how things are going to be organized for your workspace. And they're pretty similar, but one or the other, CS 5.5 editing or this editing workspace here. I'm going to click on CS 5.5. That's the one that I usually use. And it just formats these panels in a certain way. We can see that I have this lower left, the upper left, the lower right, and then the upper right panel. And that's great. And then this middle bit is the toolbar. And the default toolbar is the most useful one, the selection tool, which we're going to see in a moment. So I'm going to go to import. So the file menu, blah, blah, blah. I usually do this with a keyword shortcut. So yeah, Command I, just couldn't see it right there. I always do Command I, so I sometimes forget like where on that menu it is. So import Command I, and then I'm going to go to my folder for the footage. And I'll just, I can just import the whole thing. You could actually go in here and just import them individually, one by one, if you don't want the whole bit in there. But let's just imagine that I want the whole folder in there. I'll just click on that to import. And also, I would recommend having your music. Let's see, what would I recommend for this? I'm going to create a new subfolder. Let's imagine that this is the class folder that you guys have. That you would call music, and I will go to where I have my music just for my own use here, teaching. I think it's under this folder here, and I have just these songs. I'm going to just click and drag, not click and drag, but copy all of these over into my new music subfolder. Copy. So here's a bunch of music files. You do need actual music files. You can't just sort of directly plug something from Spotify or YouTube into your editing software. You have to download the music as an audio file, as a music file, onto your computer, and then also have that pre-organized into some folder. Like you have your footage, you really do need to pre-organize things like music into some subfolder that wouldn't need to move or change sometime later. So I'm going to just import one song. I'll do Command I for this one. Backstep here, my music folder, and which one was it that I had? Not that one. I think it was this one. Nope. Maybe it was this one here. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so import this song by My Bloody Valentine. Great band from, well, actually they're still together, but they started kind of like in the early 90s. And yeah, I'll just double click on this subfolder and open up this. Instead of just clicking and dragging, dragging and dropping a media clip into your timeline, I would recommend starting it with certain settings. And so if you go to New Sequence, a timeline, this whole thing is your timeline area, but you need to load what's called a sequence into it. And a sequence really is referring to a sequence of clips, which becomes your movie, as you edit it. So I'll click on Sequence. And then I would recommend going to a certain preset. If you see this big confusing list of folders, these are all different kinds of presets. I would go to AVCHD and then click on the 1080p. And if you open that, choosing This is a standard for internet publication. Now, if you have a frame rate that you've selected, which is much faster, for example, 1080p 60, you could click on that. If most or all of your footage is at that faster frame rate. Most phones shoot at a standard of 30 frames per second, which is what the 30 here stands for. The 1080 refers to the resolution or the number of pixels, the pixel dimensions. What that really means in this case is 1920 pixels for the height, and then 1080 pixels for the vertical. Why am I saying height? It doesn't mean height. Why does it say height? That's really the width. Yeah, interesting. I don't know why. Why is it the H? Anyways, this is wide. It's 1920 pixels wide is what that number really means. And then this is the vertical, 1080 pixels for the vertical. And then 29.97, technically that's what 30 frames per second is for just some technical reason. And so that's the one I'm going to do for this project. But if you are shooting at 60 frames per second, you would choose this one here. I'll just choose this one here. Click on OK. Now I have an empty sequence, which is awesome. And I'm going to just check out, just one of these video transitions that I, was looking forward to trying out. And that's where I would recommend that you guys start. Just go to a clip that has like a video transition that you are excited to, bring in and edit. And so here's one. Yeah, that's going up, not that. Let's see this one here. And then this one tilts up. But it actually was the mailbox one here. It's a little bit later, that mailbox shot. Yeah, it's this one right here that I opened my film with. And you can decide later how you actually want to really open your film. You have a lot of ability to just sort of move things around here. So the first clip that you bring in is not necessarily going to be the opening of your film. It might be, but not necessarily. So here's the thing with this preview monitor. You could just like drag the whole clip in your timeline, which I'm going to do just at the get-go here, but I'm not going to bring in the audio. And so that's what these icons are right here. If you want to have only the video go in because you intend, for example, to have just some soundtrack music, which is what I have in my teacher demo that I shared with you, then you can click and drag video only, which is what this icon is here. This icon would be if you want only the audio from the shot, which is unusual, but that's possible, and that's what this icon would be. If you click and drag over the thumbnail itself, it's going to bring both the video and the audio. Let's just sort of see that and how that looks. So here, and then this is a thing that will show up just for the first clip. Now I've already set my sequence with certain settings that I know that I want to keep, and so with this demo, this is what I would recommend to you just for some technical reasons. It would be better to do it this way where you keep the existing settings, assuming that you chose a preset that you know you want, like I just demoed right there. Keep the existing settings instead of changing the sequence settings. So we're going to just keep it. And then if I zoom in right here, I can see that I have this first clip. Now I didn't want the audio here, I wanted just the video, so I'm going to just click on that and delete it, and then hover over the video icon and click and drag, and we can see how that compares. And I'm going to keep existing settings. So now it's just a video, and that's great because I'm planning to bring in an audio track here with my background music later on. And it's the whole darn thing. I didn't do any selection here. I'm going to show you that in a moment. I just grabbed the whole video shot as it exists for the original video file, and the entire video shot is in my timeline right here. Now, I shot this pretty carefully, and so there isn't anything necessarily that I need to trim out of this, but let's just imagine that you really want to start the shot here, and the beginning part is kind of like, maybe the camera was shaky or it wasn't like, really where you want to begin the shot. You could, if you have this selection tool selected, hover over the beginning of the clip, click and drag, and you could trim out the beginning of the clip. And that would just be removing the beginning of it, so it actually will start here. And then I could just move this over to the beginning, and then it would start there. And at the ending, if you actually don't want some ending of the clip, you could hover over this way, click and drag to trim out to the ending of the clip, so you would have some middle section like so. If I want them back, I can just bring this out and then just click and drag to bring those back, and then put this at the beginning of the timeline, and then there I am. So now let's look at this mailbox shot here. I think it might be this one. No, that's a tree shot here. Sorry, it's a utility pole. Yeah, here we go. So here's a shot that begins with a mailbox, but not entirely, right? Like I give myself some lead time. So I was actually sort of like, getting some velocity or getting some momentum with the shot as I was tracking sideways with it. And let's say that I know that I really want to start the shot probably, like say here. I'm going to just guess. I could change my mind later a little bit. But I can create what's called an in point. I for in. Notice now that I actually have a range that is indicated here in my timeline for the shot in my source monitor. And this is the beginning of a selection. And then I could click this and then bring it to the end. And let's just imagine that, I know I don't want to see this utility pole show up right there. And so I'm going to just have my playhead say about here. And then I could push O for out. So O would be the ending of the selection, and it's called an out point. In for an in point, O for an out point, and this is a selection that I'm defining in for this clip in my source monitor. And then now, when I click and drag this into my timeline, and it's going to snap to the end of this, it's only bringing in what I've selected here for my in and my out points. Now, if I want to remove my in and out points for a clip, I can go to my marker menu, and then I could clear in and out, and then those disappear. And notice that I clicked on this panel first to get this blue border around it because I wanted to select this panel first to make sure that I was clearing the in and out points from this panel. Because you could also have in and out points in your timeline. Notice that if I click in these different panels, that blue boundary shows me which panel is active, basically. Okay, now that I have that, I'm going to bring this over and just sort of see how that cut looks, just as a straight cut. And it's pretty good. It's pretty seamless. It may not be absolutely perfect. And this is where I can do some sort of work with my editing. And here's the thing is this shot, I'm noticing that I'm sort of swooping in a little bit, and it cuts this shot. And what I might do is go to a transition to hide that. And this is not a big deal. I mean, it works pretty well. It's still oh, it's kind of cool, right? Nothing is wrong with that, but if I create a little bit of a cross dissolve, I could blend that a little bit more smoothly. So if I click on this double arrow in my lower left panel right here, it shows me what other tabs are available inside this lower left panel. One of them is called Effects. If I click on Effects, this is some really cool stuff right here. I'm going to just look at video transitions first, expand that, expand the dissolve menu, and where I have cross dissolve. Cross dissolve is one of the most useful video transitions, and this is an editing transition as opposed to doing in-camera video transitions, which is what you guys were shooting for in your shooting part of this project. But inside of the editing, there are things called video transitions, which would be cross dissolve or wipe or film dissolve, etc., etc. Let's look at what this looks like when there's a cross dissolve. But here's an interesting thing, is I'm not able to actually bridge the two clips entirely. And let's just sort of see how there's a little bit of weirdness going on right there, right? And let me just sort of zoom in and let's talk about that a little bit. Now, video transitions and editing, they need to have some kind of margin to work with at the ending and the beginning of the two clips that have the transition applied. Now, right now, I did not make a selection inside of the original full video shot for this first shot. And what I mean by that is, let me just delete this right here, is this shot, I'm going to move this up a little bit. This shot right here ends in my timeline where the original video clip ends as a movie file. I cannot click and drag to extend this anymore because the shot itself as a movie file ends right there. There isn't anything beyond that point. And so what I'm referring to for video transitions to be able to work is you do need to actually cut in a little bit from the maximum point. Notice when I had this out, there's a little notch, notch in the upper right corner of the clip in my timeline. That notch indicates that it's the end of the actual movie file as the movie file exists. Now when I click this and drag this in a little bit, I'm trimming the end of that shot, but then also I'm giving myself some margin for a video transition to do its blend. And it has to have some kind of margin for the two shots to be able to blend together. And I want to do this carefully because I want to make sure that the mailbox is covering my entire frame when that shot begins. And that's happening pretty much right there. Now I'm going to go to this shot right here. And I already have that margin, right? Because I did an in point. Now when I bring these together and I bring the cross dissolve in here, I'm able to actually bridge the two. Before it wasn't allowing me to actually bridge between the two clips. Now I can bridge between the two. And now there is not that awkwardness of like seeing a little bit of a flicker that was not what I wanted to have visible when the cross dissolve was doing its blending. And this doesn't need to be a very long one. If I hover over the edge of the transition, I can make this pretty small and pretty short. And then I can actually move it a little bit to the left or the right on top of the span between the two. And it doesn't have to be that long at all. I'll just sort of play this and just sort of see, actually I want this to be even shorter maybe, just a really short blend between the two. And then let's just sort of see, and it's blended a little bit. I'm going to do the back slash key, which is the key above the return key, as the shortcut to see everything inside my timeline. Okay, and then I'll go back to my bin right here. And this is a shot that ends where I'm looking up at the sky. So then I'm going to go to where I have this sky shot here. That was pretty early. I think it was this one here. Yeah, so I'm tilting down from the sky in this shot, and then I do this dolly back. I pull out to reveal the fence, and then I push in, and then I bump in. There's a little bit of a sound there because I'm bumping into the railing here. I'm going to just drag that whole shot without in and out points and show you how you can actually do some trimming in your timeline. So just snap it there, and let's just sort of see how this looks without a transition. And not bad. Actually wasn't bad at all. I don't think that I necessarily need a cross dissolve there. So it looks okay, but if I want to, I'm going to just trim this a little bit, and here's a different way of trimming. I could actually just trim this like this, and then there's a little bit of a gap, and then I could just click and drag this to go back to it. But then here's going to be a little bit of a difference from that. Instead of doing that way, I could click on this third tool, which is the Ripple Edit tool. And notice actually it's bundled next to some others, but the first one is Ripple Edit tool. And if I hover over this, instead of a red cursor with an arrow, I have a yellow one, which means I have a Ripple Edit. Now, what Ripple Edit means is if I click and drag, notice that the arrow is pointing towards this clip, which means that if I click and drag, it's going to be modifying this clip and not this clip because the arrow is pointing in that, that direction. Now, if I click and drag this towards the right, notice that when I release this, there is no gap, but the clip is actually shorter. So a Ripple Edit means it's going to keep clips which are stuck to each other or adjacent to each other. It's going to keep them stuck to each other. It's going to keep them adjacent to each other, but it's going to actually do the trimming without producing a gap. So the whole clip moved over this way to make sure that the clip remains stuck and adjacent to this one right here. And then now I can just sort of see that, yeah, I gave myself a little bit right there. And the reason that I trimmed it a little bit is because I want to add a little bit of a cross dissolve. Just to blend this a little bit more seamlessly, so I'm sort of hiding the fact that there is actually a transition there. And then I'm going to just make this really short, and let's just sort of see how that looks. Yeah, nice soft cross dissolve, really lovely, and it's kind of invisible. Like the casual viewer may not even notice that there was a cross dissolve. And that's really cool because then the magic occurs, right? Like when we actually tilt down to show this entirely different scene. This is just like a block or two away from the other one, but visually it's entirely different. That's where, some magic can be there for your audience in terms of your playfulness, shifting perspectives, and having contrasts with these creative video transitions. Okay, that's all I'm going to just be demoing for this. I'm going to just save this as... No, actually, I don't need to save it as because I've already created it when I did the opening. I was just sort of forgetting that with Premiere. You don't need to save as after you open it because you've already assigned a destination folder and you've already given it a file name. So just simply save is okay, just to be updating your file where it is. Now I'm going to be showing you guys more. Actually, I guess, yeah, just one more thing. For those of you who want to keep watching, if you want to get started. Here's my audio file. It's a M4A. It's a sound file that I've downloaded. I can just open this up. In here, I'm going to just click and drag it, the audio into audio track 1. And we have this volume. I can see my levels here. It's at -6 decibels, which is pretty good. And if I want to expand the actual audio track, if I hover over the boundary, if I hover over the left side here of your sequence in the timeline, and then the bottom edge of it, if you click and drag on the bottom boundary of the track itself, audio track 1, you can make a track bigger or smaller. You can do the same for video track 1, for example. bigger or smaller. And if it's big, you can actually get like little visual reminders of like like what clip is which just by looking at it in your timeline here. Yeah, I'm going to be showing you guys more tomorrow, but this is just a way for you guys to get started if you want to get started tonight. So thank you for watching.